Pay attention. The man handcuffed the man to the bed. A wicked grin appeared on the man's face as he took a step closer to him, contemplating whether to start from the top or just attack the bottom. This night, the cries of men's desire to be rejected resonated through the heavens. Wow, that was really exciting. And why did he fall into the hands of men? It all started with a debt collection a few days ago. Blair, the main character, is an employee of a debt collection agency, but his harmless appearance and soft-spoken tone have resulted in him never collecting a single debt since he started. Blair thought it was because the debtor was too difficult to deal with, and his colleagues should not be able to recover the debt so easily, until his colleague and good friend Eli, in front of him 3 or 2, actually debtors take the initiative to pay back the debt. He realized that the failure to collect the debt is actually his own problem. Returning empty-handed, Blair is once again scolded by his boss. It just so happens that an intern, Carrie, is starting today, and the boss warns Blair that if he comes back empty-handed next time, he'll let Carrie take his place. And even more bad luck is yet to come when Blair comes home to find that his dad has received a letter from his lawyer and realizes that he's in big debt. But I have to say, Blair's dad is really eloquent, and in a couple of words, he blindsides the simple Blair into thinking that the other guy owes Blair's dad money. Blair's father, without a second thought, directly asked Blair, who works as a debt collector, to help his family to get the money back. In order to keep his family from going bankrupt, Blair could only agree to this with a stiff upper lip. Not only that, but the boss warns Blair that if the deal hasn't worked out, he's going to fire him. Now Blair has absolutely no way back but to find a way to collect the debt. What he doesn't know is that it's all a scheme by Blair's dad and his friend, Amos, to delay the debtor's collection, and Blair is just one piece of the puzzle. Blair's target person is on an island that must be reached by boat, but when he arrived at the dock, he found that the ship had already sailed away. Luckily for him, at the hotel he's staying at, he meets a nice little handsome Nemo. Nemo is heading to the island first thing in the morning and, learning that Blair's destination is also there, graciously offers to take him along. The evening passes quickly, and Nemo keeps his promise to bring Blair to the island. As soon as the two came ashore, they saw, coming face to face, the handsome Arno. Blair's eyes widen momentarily as he looks at Arno's face. It turns out that Arno is the target of Blair's trip, and he needs to collect a huge amount of money owed to Arno. From a conversation between Nemo and Arno, Blair learns that the two are brothers. In order not to expose himself prematurely, Blair rushed off with his bags. When the two left, Blair quickly approached a resort employee and asked Arno for his identity. Learning that Arno is the owner of the island resort immediately puts the idea of debt collection in his mind. The scene shifts back to Bangkok, where Amos, Blair's boss, makes his living as a money lender and naturally has a lot of people who can't pay him back. On this day, a defaulter sends his son Gail to cover his debt because he can't pay. It's the exact same approach as Blair's dad. Gail is very upset about this thing he calls collateral. When he arrives at the company, he is also defiant, but unfortunately, the situation forces him to compromise and become a follower of his boss's son. Eli, unlike his dad, doesn't care to do things like lending money. He had dreams of boxing, and Amos, seeing his son's preference and to give cover to his great business, purposely built a boxing ring on the office premises. But from start to finish, Eli was the only fighter in the ring, and it was left to entertain himself by following the sandbag. Eli and Gail's first meeting goes badly. Eli doesn't like the ever-unhappy heel Gail, who's holding a grudge against his mortgage status. The two were always full of unpleasantness. At this point, a small hiccup occurs that causes the two to ease up a bit. Gail hears about it from Eli, who loves boxing, but Amos isn't supportive and uses his son's interest as a shield to cover his own career. Being used by his father in this way makes Gail's heart ache, and he can't help but think of himself being used as collateral by his father. Believing that Eli is in the same position as he is, without realizing it, his animosity towards Eli dissipated. When he learns that Eli doesn't have a boxer to spar with, Gail offers to teach Eli his own boxing. As a heel, he was happy to be Eli's sidekick. At this moment, Eli felt that the man in front of him didn't seem so obnoxious after all. On the other side of the island, Blair is still on a debt collection mission. He sees Arno on the beach talking to an employee and wants to go up and find out what's going on. As a result, Arno dodges Blair's questions and never answers Blair positively. That's not all. Blair actually stabbed her foot on a seashell on the beach. Warmonger Arno could only put down the work at hand and take him aside to treat his wounds. These two schoolboys don't forget to quarrel even when they are treating their wounds, fearing that the viewers don't know that they will have a sweet love in the future. Afterward, Arno urges Blair to return to Bangkok early, stating that he should leave quickly while he still can. Arno seems to have figured out that Blair owes herself a huge amount of money about the man's child. Despite Arno's good advice, Blair is rebellious. He doesn't listen. He only thinks that if he doesn't get his money back, his family will go bankrupt and he'll be fired. So, under the pretext of being injured, he stays directly in the hotel run by Arno, trying to get close to the water and vowing to recover the money Arno owes him. The next day, Blair discovers that Arno and one of the resort's employees are, well, in a relationship, so he decides to use the food to turn the employee, trying to ask him about the location of Arno's property, and take it with him far away. The employee looks at the simple Blair in front of him and, pretending he's not reading his mind, tells him that Arno is hiding a chest of treasure in the distance and says he can't take Blair there. Without hesitation, the simple Blair follows Haley straight into the middle of nowhere. At this point, Blair doesn't realize she's been tricked and exclaims that Arno really knows how to find a place to hide. It's not until Haley states outright that she won't sell out her friends that Blair realizes she's been teased. Just as the two are arguing, Arno shows up. I don't believe you when you say you're not watching Blair, even if you're in the middle of nowhere. After Arno leaves Haley, he advises Blair to go back to the city again. Unfortunately, at this point, Blair still doesn't get the situation and righteously states that Arno will leave as soon as he returns the money. Arno doesn't budge either. After all, he's not owed any money as an islander. And Blair, the stupid kid, was sold by his dad and didn't even know it. The two just fell out. Haley, who had brought herself, had gone ahead and Blair had to hike back to the hotel. As night falls and there is little lighting in the middle of nowhere, the timid Blair is frying with every step. Eventually he gives in to the horror and turns back to Arno, hoping he'll drive him back. Unfortunately, Blair's way of begging is like someone owes him money. No one else would say yes. Just as he was halfway to the door, paralyzed with exhaustion, Arno appeared behind him with a flashlight. In the end, the soft-hearted Arno can bear to see Blair walking alone at night, and personally acts as a bodyguard to take him back to his room. The next day, Arno and Blair open formal talks. He states that he doesn't owe any money and won't pay Blair, once again telling him to go back to Bangkok. Blair, on the other hand, thinks Arno has a weak heart and is driving himself away. He says he's a tourist and Arno has no business kicking himself out. With those words, Arno, as the boss, couldn't say anything else, so he let Blair settle the room for free. As it turned out, the expensive lodging worked much better than Arno's bitter persuasion. Blair packed his bags and left the hotel as fast as he could, but Blair doesn't give up on his debt collecting operation. He decides to find a cheap inn on the island and stay there. But after asking around, he realizes that the entire island is owned by Arno. He doesn't understand why Arno is so rich and won't pay it back. Blair, who has run into walls everywhere, meets Mishi on the road and pesters him to find himself a place to live. The helpless Mishi can only arrange for him to be in a remote cottage, saying that it's where Arno used to live and has been deserted for a long time and won't be discovered. Blair has no doubts, happily checks into the cottage and starts cleaning. This simple Blair doesn't realize that he has walked step by step into the trap set by Arno. Blair is cleaning her room and finds lots of cute little toys and mentally spits out Arno's perverted hobbies. It was then that he found a deed in his nightstand. After reading it carefully, he finally realized what was going on. It turns out that the real debtor is Arno, and the Blairs are the ones who owe the money. Realizing the truth, Blair hurriedly packs his bags and tries to escape the island before Arno finds out. But by then it's too late, and Blair is spotted by Arno just as she's heading out the door. Now Blair frowns. Hadn't she agreed to never be found out? Turns out, it was all Arno's plan. Knowing that Blair can't find a place to stay on the island, he deliberately arranges for Mishi to have a chance encounter with him, and also has Mishi put him up in the villa where he lives. As soon as Blair moves in, he's Arno's man. Now the prey and the hunter are swapped. To keep Blair from wandering off, Arno even handcuffs him to the bed with a small prop to get closer to him. Arno keeps teasing Blair, and whenever he doesn't tie up his hands, Arno seduces him first with sweet talk to try to get him to untie himself. Just then, Blair takes advantage of Arno's inattention and bites him hard on the neck, leaving a teeth mark. What's in it for me? If you leave a little red mark on your neck, won't everything be fine and you'll just become Mrs. Islander? No, Arno is even less likely to untie Blair and just chain him to the bed and go spit on his friends. On the other hand, Blair, who is chained to his bed, contacts his dad and asks him to quickly raise money to save himself. Turns out Blair's dad doesn't give a damn about his son's situation and cuts the phone off by pretending the signal is bad. In fact, he did not completely ignore his son and was still trying to raise money. Using his usual investment scamming method, he fooled a rich-looking grandpa. Moncler outlet store. He soon sent a sum of money and promised to send him the balance in a couple of days. So it seems that it's not so much that Blair is so gullible as it is that Blair's dad is so skewed at deception. Next, let's move on to Gail's side of the story. He's become more and more ambiguous between the two, since he's become Eli's sparring partner. Unfortunately, there is still a gulf between the debtor and the debtor. After all, that day, While the two were practicing, Amos brought up Gail's dad's debt once again, wanting Gail to go back and talk to his father about it. Looking at the embarrassed Gail, he doesn't say anything more and says he'll have Carrie, his new right-hand man, go ahead and collect the debt. Thinking about it, Amos suddenly remembered that he hadn't seen Carrie lately and couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. What he doesn't realize is that Carrie has already claimed Gail's dad's debt. The reason he delayed handing the money back to the company was that he was worried that Gail would have to leave town once the debt was cleared. He feared that Eli, who had managed to find a companion, would once again be alone, and he could never make up his mind. Eli, who learns of Carrie's thoughts, tells him that Carrie, as an employee, will have to hand over his money sooner or later. As friends, they have to trust Eli to handle his relationship with Gail. If anything happened, they, the friends, would be firmly on Eli's side. After listening to Eli, Carrie seems to have come to a decision. On said return to the island, Blair breaks free and finds Arno wanting a statement. As it turned out, Arno had urgent business to attend to and left in a hurry after entrusting him to the care of his friend Hubry. Hubry, looking like a nice guy, learns of Blair and Arno's feud and warms up to the idea that he can send Blair back to Bangkok. He also thoughtfully treated Blair to a sumptuous meal. Blair thought he had finally met a good person, but as he ate, he felt his head spinning and lost consciousness all of a sudden. Now, he's met his nemesis. Arno was inviting his friends to join him. When Blair regained consciousness, he found himself back in Arno's bed, and Arno, the debtor, is looking straight at him from the bedside. To prevent Blair from escaping, Arno once again handcuffs him to himself with a small prop, then takes him to work himself out of debt. The twisted dominatrix is a bit of a turn-on to watch. Unable to help the situation, Blair can only resign herself to her fate and dutifully sells her physical strength to pay off the debt her father owes her. After working all afternoon, Blair hadn't even taken a sip of water and was so thirsty he could barely speak. Arno saw this and just grabbed a coconut and split one for him. Full of coconut water, Blair feels the coolness of summer. Afterward, Arno once again handcuffs Blair to himself, afraid he'll leave him. It looks a bit like holding a puppy, but the screen still overflows with sweetness. Arno takes Blair to the beach on his motorcycle, and for the reason that the two are now handcuffed together, not on the motorcycle, they have to not be intimate. It also caused a wonderful feeling to well up in both of their hearts. Debtors and debtors, at last, slowly realized that the other gradually broke into their hearts. Looking at the slowly setting sun, Blair can't help but feel that Arno, being the owner of the island, is well clothed and well fed, and has never had the same worries as himself. But Arno suddenly got sad and said allegorically that some people live their lives desperately just to make things a little better for their families, but end up being cheated by their best friends and lose their lives. With that said, and in an annoyed mood, he unlocked Blair's handcuffs. Actually, Arno was talking about his father in that sentence. Back in the day, Arno's dad worked hard to finally earn a fortune so that his family could have a good life. I didn't realize that Blair's dad, at that time, had swindled all the money of his good friends based on his skillful cheating. And in a moment of anger, Ian's father died as a result. The memories fall away and the scene comes to Blair's dad's side, who decides to do one last job and stop cheating. He waited and waited, and finally waited for the big man he had fooled before to come to pay the final payment. After receiving this money, he'd come up with enough to redeem what he owed for his son. And at the moment, his son is playing hide and seek with the islander. After Arno aunties Blair, Blair slips out when he's not looking. Unfortunately, the huge island is owned by Arno, and Blair can't escape the islander no matter how hard he tries. It didn't take long for Blair to get caught. Arno cuffs him once more, and the two return to their sweet little home together. Arno also has to sleep in the same bed as him, which scares Blair. After all, Arno is the one who used those sick little props now. After returning home, Blair can't help but ask Arno why there are so many little props. After Arno explains everything, Blair finally lets go. Since the other party didn't have any special fetishes, it didn't seem like a disadvantage to sleep with someone so handsome. This whole night, nothing happened between the two of them. As it turns out, the next morning, Blair tries to find out if Arno is awake and meets the islander's eyes. Between their four eyes, an ambiguous current ran wildly through the two of them. That's when a memory flooded Arno's mind. Turns out, he and Blair have known each other since they were kids. Arno used to help Blair, so Blair makes a pact with Arno to repay him when he grows up, stating that his name represents the sun. So, one would dye one's hair orange, which represents the sun, so that Arno would be able to recognize him. So when Blair, with her long hair, appears in front of Arno, he recognizes Blair instantly and resolves to watch over him. This pure affection of two youngsters is very enviable to me. The memories fall away, and Arno is still basking in the sweetness of his kiss with Blair. As he makes his rounds on the island, he finds Blair hard at work. At that moment, the coconut suddenly falls, and Arno, quick as a flash, pulls Blair into his arms. deflecting the heavy blow for him. Now, Blair knows that her heart is hurting and is constantly concerned about Arno. It was at this point that he realized that Arno had left an indelible mark on his heart. Blair helps Arno to rest and the two talk about their destiny to each other in the light of the setting sun. Their names are different, but they all represent the sun. Such a coincidence made the two men feel that the red rope of the moon goddess had tied them firmly together at their birth. Just as their relationship is heating up, an unexpected visitor, Blair's dad, arrives on the island. He came with money to redeem his son. During Blair's dad's conversation with Arno, Blair learns of the connection between Arno's dad and her own dad, and can't help but feel a little disappointed in her father. And Arno rips up the check that Blair's dad brought and uncuffs Blair, saying that he doesn't want to think about Blair's dad anymore. The two have put the past behind them, and Blair can't follow her dad and return to her original life. With that said, Arno left on his own, but at this time, Blair has understood his heart. How could he leave his beloved? Ignoring his father's thoughts, he went straight after Arno in the direction he had left. Blair stops Arno and slowly speaks his heart, stating that he wants to stay on this island all the time, with the people he loves. Not only that, he borrowed a sum of money from Arno. The amount doesn't matter, as long as he never pays it back for the rest of his life. Hearing Blair's heartfelt confession, Arno can't hold back his inner emotions and rushes forward to hug the lovely man in front of him tightly. The two finally came to grips with their hearts and took the brave step to become a sweet little couple. With that side out of the way, on Gail's side of the story, Carrie ends up paying Amos the debt Gail's dad owes him, and just as Carrie expected, Amos, who received the money, is going to keep Gail back without saying a word. Eli sees this and protests strongly, asking his father to keep Gail as his chaperone. Amos eventually couldn't argue with his son and agreed. After a long time of practicing, Gail has finally become a competent fighter as well. The two decided to get in the ring and have a bout. Seeing this, Amos smells money again, and he opens up and calls in a lot of spectators and makes a ton more money. The two lovers do not admit defeat to each other on stage, and seem to want to use this fight to compete to find out who is on top. One slip and the two fell together on the stage. This ambiguous atmosphere made them forget about the spectators on the field. With each other left in their eyes, and Blair and Arno on the island begin a sweet happily ever after. The two woke up together in a sweet little boat, happily running and playing on the beach, sitting on the beach and announcing to the sea that the islander and the islander's wife were going to be happy for the rest of their lives, never to be separated. And that's the end of the show. That's the end of the Even Sun series. Blair and Arno's families of origin are more or less unfulfilled, but they become each other's son, dispelling the grayness in their lives. In life, all people inevitably encounter some unsatisfactory things. I hope you can't face the sun, bravely move forward, believe that all the good is waiting for you in the future. Well, that's it for today's video. If there's anything you'd like to say, let me know in the comments as well. We'll see you in the next installment.